With some weird times ahead of us, guys. I sound like a husky, and listen, if I have a coughing fit in the middle of this, I'll probably just chop the video up so you just see me disappear for a bit, because I've had a weird chest thing for 5 days and I'm just coming out the back end of it. It's pretty horrible. But look, right now, the Air Force can't get people to join. It can't get people to fly. And I think Starmer, with his peace thing, wanting to go out into Ukraine, he can't get people to want to do that either. And so let's talk about why that is. I want to do this like in front of the computer so I can go through a few news stories. But right now, literally, I'm struggling. Just struggling. So I just want to try and get this video out real quick, and I will keep it short. By the way, if you want to find news that's unbiased as well, in the middle of this video, I'll put a 2-minute bit in about ground news, all right? Because they sponsor some more of these videos. I only let people sponsor my videos. Well, this is only the first people to sponsor anyway, whose product I actually use myself, and I do use Ground News' product. So it's in the middle there, 2 minutes. Skip over it if you want. So what Starmer is saying is that we're going to put in peacekeeping forces in Ukraine. But the problem he's got is he's told every white male, which is the most popular demographic for joining the military right now, that they're toxic and they're the patriarchy and everything else. And of course, what we've seen in the military, especially under Mike Wixon, the Royal Air Force, is unfortunately there's been quite a few people who have got my skin color and my sexuality who have been sidelined for the diversity push. And we know that's true. I've done videos about it. And so when you're not valued like that, you're not going to go somewhere and join something where you're not going to feel that, you know, merit is going to be the answer. Because there's one thing, well, you know, you want to be in a race that's kind of relatively even. You know, that's all I say. And so I just thought I'd talk about why it's a struggle with piloting. I mean, they're 30% down on piloting. And when I talk about piloting, when I talk about pilots, you know, weapons system officers, everything else, anything to do with their crew. Think about it as other branches as well, like engineers, suppliers, you know, admin, logistics, you know, engine. As I say engineer, I did, yeah, sorry, that kind of stuff. It's exactly the same thing. Where anyway, your cohort, your main demographic, which tends to be white men, when they're not joining, something fundamentally is up. And I think it's a bit of a conspiracy. I think we've basically, well, we haven't, because I haven't and you haven't either, because that's why you're watching this channel. But the government has made this country so, like when I was ill, I'm ill, like the last 5 days. And when you're ill, you don't have time for anything really. I mean, what I mean by that is, you're just focusing on, like, just you're feeling awful, you know. There's no color, there's nothing exciting. Everything is dull. Everything is dulled down. It's depressed. And when I was kind of like ill, and I still am a little bit, guys, don't get me wrong, it's just, you look back, I was out in France and I had this, I was snowboarding, and I had about 3 or 4 days snowboarding. It was pretty cool. I got it on the last day, right? And we're in a town, Chamonix. It's quite a low down mountain town, which has really grown quite a lot since I've been there, maybe 15 years ago. But in this town, or just outside this town, we went to this, I'll put a picture up of it, went to this little cafe for breakfast. My wife and I, before we snowboard, we're old now, right? So older, 50. We just go for a croissant, a cup of tea. The snow's going to be there, right? You know what I'm saying? No rush. And we would leave our boards outside, go in and get stuff, and people would put their laptops on the tables and go and buy a coffee. It was like a high trust environment in this little town. And I just thought, being out there in France, I'm not saying France is like this in its entirety, but in this mountain village it was. I was looking back at the UK thinking, we've lost that, you know, we've lost that connectivity, that cohesion, that homogeneity. And so if you don't have that, if you don't have something worth fighting for, you're not going to want to go and fight. I think that's the big thing right now that the young'uns are seeing when they look at the military. Now, not all of them. People write to me all the time saying, Tim, I really want to join the military. I've got a lot of guys writing to me at the moment, frustrated with the process of getting in. So there are people that still want to do it. I think the issue is, you may still get people into the military. I think the military is far too small. It can't support itself overseas on any more than one operation. But also, I think people have looked back at like Iraq and the lies that we're told about that, or Afghanistan and the ineptitude, and why bother with, I mean, anything really. You know, what happened when we overthrew Gaddafi in Libya, and Gaddafi was there to basically stop immigrants leaving North Africa. We can go through every single one. You know, when Saddam Hussein was overthrown, and of course ISIS then formed in the vacuum that was left. I mean, everything about it, everything we've done, people realize it's been pointless and useless, and our whole attempts have been vacuous. There is no reason for it other than to prop up some defense shareholder. And I sound awful when I say I sound awful anyway, but I don't want to be that kind of critic. I understand that the processes work like that. Like, if you remember, there was an aide of Gorbachev, I can't remember his name, that actually turned around to America back in the late 80s and said, what we've done in Russia now is we've just deprived you of an enemy, when he broke up the USSR and stuff. And that's really damaging to do that to a country. And I was thinking about this when I was out in France, looking back at the UK, thinking we've got to have an enemy. Not that I want one, but the UK has to have one. It's like Starmer needs to have Russia as an enemy. The great game. Like, Starmer wants to be this Thatcherite politician. His rating is so low, it's through the floor. He almost needs a war. And so even though I'm talking about how hard it is to rectify this issue with the Air Force, it's all linked to politics, because we've got to get guys in there to the military. We've got to train them up. A 30% shortfall of pilots is huge, because what it means is you can't free guys up from the front line to bring them back into flying training. Sorry guys, I'm struggling here. To then train them as instructors. So when I was an instructor, guys would come back to the front line. It took me 9 months to train them up to be a basic level instructor. So your Typhoon pilot, your F-35 pilot, they come back onto the squadron that I was on. My team would train these guys up. It would take a long time. And then they're trained as an instructor, but a baby instructor, and then we got to grow them into being a bigger instructor so that they can teach other instructors. It doesn't happen overnight. These guys have families, they leave, they get injured. So you kind of need a surplus. And we were running lean back then when I was up until 2018. I mean, I was asked to rejoin. But I don't like the way the country's going. So if you don't believe that our motives are sincere, which I don't, then it's very hard for you to kind of serve those motives. Now, here's the thing I will say to guys like in the service as well, because I know you're in the service thinking I'm some Russian shill or something like that. I understand it. I get it. Like, when I was in the service, I had no time to read anything from anywhere. I was busy all the time. Now I'm out, and especially when I was sacked from defence about 3 years ago, I didn't have a job. I had a lot of time to read, listen to podcasts, listen to real experts on this, and read books. I mean, just consume a lot of stuff. And although, I'm not, of course, no one's saying that Russia is perfect. Geez, not at all. But this is just like two brothers out in Ukraine and Russia, just two brothers just smashing the hell out of each other, trying to solve some stuff that has nothing to do with us. There's this kind of feeling that some of the people have in the military at the moment when they contact me and they're saying, Tim, obviously I'm a Russian shill, they're saying, Russia, on one hand, they're saying to me, Russia's weak, we can take Russia. I'm like, all right, you're valid, whatever. And then in the same phone call, they're telling me that Russia's going to take over the whole of Europe. I'm like, dude, listen to yourself. On the one hand, you're telling me Russia's weak and it can't take more than 20% of Ukraine. And in the same phone call, mate, you're telling me that Russia's going to come across the channel and it's going to invade our shores. And here's the thing. Why are we in Ukraine? Trying to prevent Russia invading Ukraine's borders when we can't even stop a bloody young kid from North Africa coming to ours? It doesn't make sense. It's almost a conspiracy. Like, we need these people coming into the UK right now. So the problem we've got is we've got a lot of young people in the UK that would fight for it. But they don't want to fight for it because they can't fight for it. There's nothing to fight for. We're no longer a homogenous, high-trust society. We're just not. What are we fighting for? Like, if we're not here, are there people going to protect our families in the UK? Because we're very diverse right now. And I've said it for a long time. But I don't believe that diversity is good. I don't believe it's good or bad. And I'm also talking about diversity of cognition.
Guys, the Ukraine-Russia story is still very prominent in the news, but are we seeing the full story? My wonderful sponsors at Ground News here. Now, I love these guys and I use them for all of my news. Now, what they do is they piece together some amazing articles from publications all across the political spectrum, and you get access to every single angle that you could possibly need. Now, let's take a look at this article concerning the Ukraine-Russian war. Trump threatens Russia with tariffs and sanctions if it does not agree to end the war. Now, Ground News shows that there is 378 articles here covering this particular topic. Now, the Kiev Independent is a little bit more left-leaning, shall we say, focuses here on the likelihood of the US sanctioning Russia if Moscow refuses peace negotiation. Now, the South China Morning Post, a little bit more centrist, they kind of focus on what will happen consequentially if Russia doesn't really follow through with the peace talks. And lastly, clicking on the right, the India TV News may take it in a completely different way and looking at it as like a threat-based thing and what might happen if they don't actually make that deal. And I love their bias distribution panel here on the right hand side. It says that the majority of publications that have been covering this are right, with only 34% left. And if you look at this factuality table here, it actually tells you how kind of trustworthy each one of those sources actually is. Ground News is my only way of getting unbiased news, guys. So if you want to go and subscribe through ground.news/FJP or click the QR code you can see on the screen now, you'll get 40% off their top tier Vantage plan. That's the one I use to work out what's going on in this Russian-Ukraine conflict. Thank you for Ground News for actually sponsoring me on this particular video.
People talk about diversity all the time, and then eventually when you say, look, you're telling me you want a black person, why? And they go, well, you know, because I think it's good to get different thinking from different. So you're telling me that black people think differently then? Because that sounds a bit racist to me. And then they get all messed up because they don't understand what diversity really means. And then they start talking about diversity of cognition is more important. And I say, well, let's have all white people then. And then they go, well, that's just racist because then you're not letting any black people in. And then they don't understand it. You know, I couldn't care less. I really couldn't care less. I just want people to be on message with what British values and cultures are in a Christian country. And that's not happening. And I think people in the military feel the same way. It's like, I don't care who's next to me. I never cared who was in the cockpit with me. Genuinely, woman, man. You know, I've flown with Indians. I've flown with Pakistanis. I've flown with Jordanians, Iraqis. I've flown with Americans. I mean, God, it goes on. Australians, New Zealanders. It doesn't matter. But they've got to be good. I've got to have some influence in their training so I know they're good. Some oversight. And they were. It doesn't matter who they are, what colour they are or nothing, but they've got to be on message, right? We've got to be doing the right thing. I think we're lacking standards. That's it. I think we're lacking standards in the UK, and that's why this whole thing from Starmer is not going to work. Because no one cares. No one believes him. We know it's just to prop up this defence industry or to hide the spending that happened under COVID, try and get the UK back on track. You know, we know if you... It's kind of really weird. It's like... I'm trying to put it in an analogy that you might understand a little bit better, but I'm not clever enough right now because I'm ill. I can't. I'm just, you know, I'm not clever enough to be able to do it. But think about it, right? For the last couple of decades, you've done everything that the British people have not wanted. The British people have even left Europe because it was an immigration vote. They just didn't want to be part of this bureaucracy, the EU, the commissariat, whatever you want to call it. They didn't want to be part of that. They didn't want to be under unelected bureaucrats making laws that we had no influence in, or very little. So they wanted to leave that. They wanted to leave the EU, and they voted to leave the EU, and they did. The British people left the EU. And so we did that. And so we wanted to bring back, you know, this people in the UK with a unique, cohesive value. We wanted to appreciate each other and be part of something that was ours, right? And then for the last couple of decades, all we've had before and after that was this immigration. Like, I think 2023 there was 905,000 people came in, so which has been fundamentally let down by not only the Conservative government but obviously still by the Labour government, primarily Conservatism of course. But it was Tony Blair back in 97, everything from 97, isn't it? Bloody Blair. I'd have these people in front of a court. People don't realise how brutal I would be around this country. I believe, you know, might is right, strength is power, and people just sometimes need a punch in the face, me included sometimes. And I get it. People do meet me in the street sometimes, and you know, they're threatening, right? But I'm 230 pounds and I'm angry most of the time. I'm okay. If you do meet me in the street, guys, just show me your hands. That's all I'm saying. Which is what happened recently. Just show me your hands. But you know, we sometimes need a slap to recalibrate. A lot of people don't realise the damage that's being done in this country by their attitudes. And also by the inattention, by not speaking up and not saying anything. I think by by Starmer and the Conservatives before him allowing so many people to come into the country and diversifying what was a unique and homogenous people. The English people, come on. Who is like us around the world? I mean, I say English because the Welsh and the Scottish and the Northern Islands are so small. I don't want to use British because it's an export variant, but you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the United Kingdom here, but who's like us? People argue me online and they argue in English. They criticize me and I'm like, speaking my language, mate, not the other way around. What England did for so many countries around the world, I just can't understand it. But either way, you know, don't say thanks then, no worries. But either way, you know, we're in this position where now Starmer says, I'm going to, you know, diversify you all like Conservatives did. We're going to break up who you are. We're not going to support your national identity. Oh, and I want you to go and fight this foreign war with the Russians who the British people have no beef with whatsoever. No, mate. And the thing is, I'm old now. I've got maybe 2 decades left max. I'll take those decades if I get rid of this cold, but, you know, thanks so much. But young people are clever. They're not going to get messed around like I was with Iraq and Afghanistan. These young'uns, they know. They write to me all the time. They're proud. They want to serve. But you've got to give them something to be proud in. You've got to do these young people some favours, you know. You've got to give them some housing. You've got to get them into relationships. You've got to get them some work, meaningful work that pays money so they can invest in their future and grow a family. If we don't do that, we lose this generation and they're leaving. They are leaving. No, fair play, good on them. I'll get a better video out soon, guys. I appreciate it. All right, Tim Davis Flush It Performance.